Gonna get out of here.
It looks like he's trying to shoot down another aircraft. The radar is just like banging back and forth. Normally when you're on the ground, the radar is going to be standby mode. You've got the blue and the red delineating kind of the good guys and the bad guys. Blue is good, red is bad. Usually they're not that maneuverable where they're like driving and shooting at the same time. What you're seeing here is kind of like a diamond takeoff, other than like the airplane flying through one another, almost like a Blue Angels, Thunderbirds kind of thing, like an air show thing. Not really doing this ever in real life, just due to like the safety and operational concerns. Awesome takeoff though, so like, you know, taking off and rolling immediately to the left. Normally like you're just departing straight ahead, you're going off the runway nice and slow, but anytime you can do that, so much more fun. You get a little G-force on yourself and it's like a roller coaster times 1,000. I wish it was as clear like when we were flying as this, where you've got like red and blue, just like denoting who's friendly and who's a bad guy. Normally you're like sifting through your radar or so many other things to try like solve who's friendly and who's not. But if it was just displayed that easily, it would solve so many problems. And what you're seeing kind of on that green box, like the how far the aircraft is and the closure rate, you actually do see that in real life, depending on what aircraft you're flying, what settings. I know this is an F4, so we're talking about 1960s technology. We've come a long way in the past 50, 60 years. So when you actually shoot a missile, you actually see a little like, you know, proof of smoke like that as it blows up if it doesn't hit anything. Most pilots like throughout training will shoot 1 or 2 missiles in the first 10 or so years. You know, these aircraft aren't big in comparison to like a commercial airliner. So when you have a couple 100-pound missile with a rocket motor kind of starting to fire as it's on the aircraft, you can actually feel it in the aircraft as it starts to shudder and go. Kind of actually see that aircraft trailing like either on fire with smoke coming out the back. You know, that's kind of how a lot of these missile shots occur in real life, whether it's not just the aircraft exploding immediately. I'm sure that does happen, but a lot of times the missiles are designed to like, you know, destroy hydraulics or flight control surfaces just because it has a higher probability of destroying the aircraft. It's going to cripple it, so it kind of does not a controlled crash, but it's not going to just explode in the air like you might see in like a, you know, like a Michael Bay movie or something like that, where it doesn't look as cool, but it still kind of achieves the same goal. Yeah, so I'm not really sure F4's capabilities in terms of dropping air-ground ordnance or like a bomb, essentially. I know they can drop dumb bombs, and a dumb bomb is just, you know, once you pickle it off the aircraft, which means you just press the button that releases the bomb, it's kind of just on its own. You know, it's up to the environmentals, the wind. If that target's moving, you're definitely not going to use an unguided bomb to hit a moving target because they might turn, they might accelerate or decelerate or any other factor. Normally you're going to use laser-guided bomb or GPS-guided bomb. Mainly it's going to be a laser-guided bomb, and that's going to be some kind of, you know, where you need a targeting pod. The bomb's going to kind of just follow that laser energy, or you can have someone on the ground or actually another aircraft airborne, whether it's a drone or another pilot kind of just lasering that bomb into its intended target. Yeah, so when you see him going there for the tank, it's not just as simple as dropping the bomb. There's going to be certain bombs, not just in terms of how it's guided in its terminal phase. You're also going to have different size bombs, how much explosives they carry within the bomb shell. There's also some bombs that are made to penetrate armor. So for something like a tank or something like just a car, even like a building, you're going to have different bombs that are designed to, you know, bust through concrete, metal armor, etc. But it's awesome. I mean, when you're dropping a bomb, especially on a fighter-sized aircraft, you know, we were dropping in like Iraq and Syria, 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, 2,000-pound bombs. You know, a 500-pound bomb, when it comes off the wing, the aircraft gives it like a pretty good rock and roll. That 500 pounds is just gone out into the wind stream. Imagine 2,000-pound bomb coming off the aircraft. The aircraft kind of rocks, not violently, but you definitely know it's gone. It's a pretty cool feeling as it comes down. You can roll up on a wing, so you can just kind of do like a 90-degree bank, and you can actually watch that bomb go for a couple thousand feet until it gets towards the ground and you kind of lose it in the ground clutter. The radar is just like banging back and forth. Normally when you're on the ground, the radar is going to be standby mode. You don't want, especially, you know, as you're taxiing around, you have ground personnel pulling pins or kind of just inspecting the aircraft. You don't want that radar blasting them in the face as they're 5-10 feet away from that. Normally it's going to be on, but it'll be essentially the safe mode. And then once you go weight off wheels, you take off, put the landing gear handle up. Now that radar becomes operational. And there's all different types of radars in terms of how they operate. Usually it's not going to be that kind of ridiculously quick scan. Flying low levels was one of the most fun missions or training missions that we did in the fighter communities, especially like in a restricted area or specific military training routes. You're allowed to go down to kind of your standard operating procedure minimums, maybe some stuff from the FAA, depending which military training route you're on. There's different modes of the radar that you can set, optimize it to either, you know, search for aircraft or, you know, just to gain an initial hit of an aircraft, and you can kind of refine it from there, kind of narrow the scan down so you can actually track it down, employ weapons. As you get to newer generation radars, technology that's 50, 60 years newer. It's way more user-friendly to do, and a lot of this has kind of been taken out. You've got the blue and the red delineating kind of the good guys and the bad guys, so kind of stereotypical. Blue is good, red is bad. Now is it just hard to delineate sometimes who's friendly and who's hostile? The bad guys in this scenario, you can see some of them are like MiG-21s, or the good guys, or MiG-23s. I think we see like Su-17. A lot of times, like, we can't get that good high fidelity just on the aircraft. There is ways that we can go about doing that with various sensors or offboard sensors that are relaying us information. But once you can get some of that information, it makes it so much easier. You're obviously looking at this in like a third person kind of point of view, but in first person, it's very, very hard if you're down low to distinguish where stuff is on the ground. So, if you're going to do like a low altitude ingress and then you'll do a pop attack, which, you might be ingressing at about 200 feet, at least in training, and then you'll pull back on the stick, you'll climb up to a predetermined altitude based off your weaponeering, which might be like 3,000-4,000 feet above the ground. Now, usually in that point, as you're starting to roll over and come back down in your dive delivery, that's when you're finally gaining visual or tally of the target.
You can get it.
Never flown a drone before. I would say unfortunately, but I'm not sure if I actually feel that way. But there's definitely pros and cons versus having drones versus having manned aircraft. The drones cost less, easily produced, at least easier than a fighter or attack aircraft. They have ability to stay on station longer, so they're able to orbit longer than a manned aircraft. We were flying into Iraq and Syria. We would fly into the country, we'd hit an Air Force tanker or a coalition tanker. We'd have a certain time that we could be orbiting, providing kind of armed overwatch or close air support before we had head back to the tanker, get more gas, fill up, do the same thing, head back to the tanker, either do the same thing or head back to the carrier. During this whole time frame, some of these bigger drones were just staying airborne the whole time without having to go to the tanker. And obviously, when you're heading to the tanker, you're kind of not overhead. They're not able to provide kind of any of that support during that time frame. You see in the news sometimes that, hey, we've had a Reaper or a Predator shot down. And usually it's in the news for a couple of days, people forget about it. And there's obviously politics that will happen behind the scene about it. If you had a manned pilot in that aircraft, he was shot down and ejected, he was captured, that's going to cause way, way more issues, not just on a diplomatic level, but, you can see that prisoners of war, PWs, have been used as kind of propaganda tools in the past. So being able to just throw the drones out there and have them remote controlled from wherever, you can definitely see kind of on a targeting pod, especially one that's going to be with infrared imaging. If you're shooting a missile or something, you can definitely see those heat sources of not just the missile with a rocket engine going, but on the ground. And you can kind of see how the tank's not distinguished from the surroundings. While it might have a hot motor, we'll have kind of a factor that we take into account called thermal crossover. So kind of as the surface of the earth or even like a body of water heats up or cools down. If it's super hot outside, especially somewhere, this summer in the desert, and you have just a car that's been parked for a little bit, or, even if it's running, but it's not running at a super hot temperature, it might blend in pretty well with the surroundings. So if you contrast that with a boat that's running on a cool body of water, that's going to be very, very easy to distinguish and break out. And a lot of these targeting pods are going to have different modes. You have the ability to look at an infrared spectrum to break it out. And a lot of times that's easier. You also might have a television mode, which is essentially, just looking through it through like a telescope, essentially.
Get out of here.
It looks like he's trying to shoot down another aircraft. Some of them will carry maybe like a air-to-air missile, mainly, and like an infrared missile. They're not going to be carrying any kind of radar-guided missile, because a lot of them don't have radars on board, but they're definitely not designed for that role. If you were to put it behind a hill or a piece of terrain or trees, fighter or attack aircraft might not be scanning with their radar down that low. And unfortunately, like, the radars can't see through mountains. The helicopter's just hiding there behind the mountain, expecting for an aircraft to fly over. It's definitely a possibility for them to have that aircraft fly over, then engage it with air-to-air kind of heat-seeking missile, if you want. One cool thing with the F-35 is that we have the ability, our helmet display, to get some of this, not necessarily our targeting pod footage in our helmet, but we're really just within our helmet without having to put on night vision goggles or anything else. One of the things that certain aircraft will go against is EA, electronic attack aircraft, and then they'll provide suppression of enemy air defenses, or SEAD. And you'll have a couple of different ways of doing that, whether the jamming, where you're shooting out trons to kind of jam the radar. You can employ ordnance. You can try to determine with a couple different sensors on board or off board the aircraft, and they can relay target coordinates to you of where this is. You can either destroy the missile site or the radar site, or some of the platforms that are actually encompassed within the same vehicle, where they both serve this vehicle as both the weapons platform and the radar or the sensor platform. Usually they're not that maneuverable where they're like driving and shooting at the same time. So normally they're kind of stationary, but it's a huge issue as we were talking about from the pilot's perspective. You don't want to be flying down low and close as much as possible. You want to be kind of up higher at a higher altitude at a distance away. So this vehicle, for example, can't shoot you, but you can still blow them up, or you can hit your intended target while they can't reach you.
Coming down, hold on.
He's dogfighting, or BFM. You speak Navy, or ACM if you're more of an Air Force type. In training, these are some of those fun training missions you can do. Going up against another aircraft or two or however many, and you're just going out there, bag of gas, just dogfighting. It's when you're in training, we'll just do like a guns only BFM or guns only dogfighting. And that takes a way different approach towards fighting when you have missiles on board. Awesome to have 50 missiles and you can shoot them all the time. Unfortunately, in real life, we're carrying a much more limited supply of missiles on board. Unfortunately now, compared to like World War II or these style planes where I don't even know how many bullets they carry, but I can guarantee you it's more than like what a modern F-18, F-16, F-15 carries, where we might get 3 or 4 seconds of a trigger squeeze until we run out of all our bullets. Where these guys, that's their sole weapon, destroying other aircraft. I can guarantee they're carrying more bullets. They have more time to squeeze their trigger before they run out of bullets. Yeah, so you can see here, he's just laying on the trigger for multiple seconds, where like in an F-18 we'd be out of bullets now. If you're on the opposite side's perspective, like you're that guy who's getting shot at, you want to try to get skinny, so you want to try to provide like the smallest kind of platform for him to shoot. He's shooting at you and you're up on a wing and he's got this whole body of aircraft to shoot at. It's going to be much easier to put a bullet into your wing, fuel tank, into your engine, or anything that's going to cripple your aircraft or destroy it. Where if you can get skinny and you can maneuver, so maneuvering in a 3D environment, it just makes it harder for the aircraft shooting to actually shoot you down, and potentially you can run them out of bullets, so then you're not even in a defensive situation. Obviously, the game's a little more arcadey, so you're going to get a lot more weapons. There's definitely kind of realistic takes in the video game, with realistic attributes. If you guys want to check out more Etheric React videos, follow Gamology on Facebook or YouTube. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can do so at DGREGR. Hope to see you next time.